For all the honeys in the Hyundai, for all my dreams, you know it's alright.
Alright, what's good YouTube? Welcome back to Mammals Gaming. I'm Sam.
And I'm Steven.
We're just going to talk about YCS Niagara. It just happened this past weekend. I wasn't there. I was on a work trip. As you guys saw, I was in Anaheim. And but Steven went. Steven, how'd you do?
Oh, fantastic.
What was your record?
We went X2 drop as our deck decided to just give us 4 hand traps and no engine.
And what round did you X2 drop?
Round 2. Yes, it was a grand old time. My round 1, I had 1 die roll, and we had opened Mourner, Valor, Imperm, Oak. So that was done.
Right? Yeah, that sucks.
Unfortunately. And in round 2, it was actually the same thing, except it was Valor, Mourner, Imperm, hollowed as Zamina, which my opponent had shifted and then Pirellia'd me, and I was like, that's fine. Doesn't matter.
Alright, but we're just going to go over a little slideshow we made, going over the recap. This event, I think is a very important event for Yu-Gi-Oh! As we know it. The game's changed a lot with the addition of Ridge of the Abyss, and we're starting to see some of the small effects that I think will branch out into a bigger change throughout the next few months. But yeah, let's get right into it. So, 2024 recap, immediately going right into the standout decks. So, there were 3 particular standout decks in this event. The top 3 decks by representation were Snake Eye Azamina, and subsequently all the different forms of Snake Eye and Fire decks that you saw, Fire King, Cash, and Rescue Ace. Second was Tempai, which was still a threat, and then third was Yubel. Now by far the most represented deck in Top Cut and probably in the room was Snake Eye Azamina, followed closely I think by, not closely, but followed by Tempai. Some sleeper decks in the format were Sky Striker, which guys, I'm pretty sure Ryan Yu was the only one that did well with that deck. He might have been one of 10 people in that whole room that played that deck. I don't know how that happened. But the other one is Labyrinth, Centurion or Centurion Bestial, Exodia, and Ritual Beast. These were all decks that found their way into Top Cut. Some of them out of nowhere, some of them had been in Top Cut before, so it's not too crazy. But yeah, some standout cards if you want to talk about it, Stevie.
For sure, Molcharmi Fuvolus. This card was obviously all over the room at the event. Just seeing the card just gave you such a feeling of insurance, playing into a board while making your opponent play awkwardly. Now, if you didn't have the answer to the card, it was just almost a done deal at that point. I recall in one of the 2 rounds I played at the event, I had actually opted for my opponent to go first, where I would side in the Fuvaluses with other breaker cards, and as soon as I activated Molcharmi on his Oak effect, he ashed it, and I was done right there and then. I was just cooked. I had no form of follow-up by losing 2 cards, which I had previously hand-trapped them. This card definitely is a meta changer for sure. Now, one thing about this card that I've seen arguments for was the inclusion of maining it or siding it. Now, I think going into this event, siding Fulos was correct because Tempai was favored for this event. Now, with Tempai, they would always make you go first, making Fulos more or less a dead card. Sure, you could use it for fodder, but it loses its effectiveness essentially. So I feel like siding the card for when you're going second, for sure, was the wave to go. Now, obviously, there were decks that played it, taking that risk, which they were rewarded for, but definitely a card that has shifted the meta. The next card, Dominance Impulse, I don't think people realize how crazy this card was going into the event. Sure, people were like, oh, it's a solemn warning from your hand, but the fact that it could hit a various number of cards was just insane. And
can I stop you right there? Solemn warning from the hand, is that not insane? The way I saw it was it's a Caesar that you don't have to make. It's absolutely crazy. It protects you against Nib. It protects you, or it disrupts them. You can hit key choke points with that card. It's good into almost every matchup. There's no deck that doesn't summon monsters for the most part, right? Even against runic decks. If they activate to summon and you impulse that, holy shit, they just lost 2 cards. It's insane.
No, yeah, it's definitely crazy. And there are ways that you can utilize this card that I don't think many people thought about, such as Metatronus, a popular card in the previous format. Just using that to stop that is insane. You just wasted a card, essentially, to try and break your board. Dominus Impulse, we saw that in the Rescue deck, since they don't play the Fiendsmith engine. It's just huge. Fire King, pure Fire King can play this card because they don't utilize the Fiendsmith engine, because they don't need to. It's just a crazy good card, and I've seen comments of people asking, how are you playing Dominus Impulse with Molcharmi Fuvolus? Well, clearly you're gonna trigger one before the other, so that argument is moot.
Keep in mind, Dominus Impulse says for the rest of the duel.
Yeah, rest of the turn.
Rest of the duel.
Oh, duel, yes.
Yeah, rest of the duel you cannot use it, which means if you activated Fuvolus and draw phase, it does not fucking matter.
Exactly.
It's actually so good. And the third card that took everyone a little bit by surprise, although this was being talked about before the event, was Retaliating Sea. I'll be honest, I thought Retaliating Sea was fake. Mostly because it does hit Snake Eye Azamina, for sure. It destroys that deck. But it doesn't really hit much else, right?
No, not really.
I think
you could technically use it on runic cards because they do special. But they more or less will have ways to out it.
It's not like crazy. Oh, although thinking back, can you actually use this on Nightmare Throne? Because it has an effect to summon.
Correct.
It doesn't. No, it's on activation.
No, so are you talking about the effect to special a Yubel once it leaves the field by a card effect?
No, it's the one that adds to hand. Oh no, it's either add. No, sorry, it's another one. That's the second effect. You can't Retaliating See that, which also means you can't Retaliating See a lot of continuous spell effects, such as Void Imagination. You can't use this on that, as well as regardless of the case. This card is especially good to, again, Snake Eye Azamina, Branded.
Technically the rescue deck as well with Emergency.
That's true. Although I've seen a lot of rescue decks not really care too much.
No, rescue in the very beginning was able to play Shifter to an extent, so
that's true.
It doesn't really hurt them that badly.
But we saw a lot of this card being in the side deck. I don't know exactly how good it was. All I know is that it was in a lot of topping side decks. But did you see it at all?
I didn't see anything from the top tables as I was watching, but there is argument that it is a good card if you're expecting to play the mirror. If you're playing Snake Eye, I don't think it's a bad call. It's just what you're expecting at the top tables. Definitely is a blowout if you're playing the mirror match, and the first action is either OSS or Hollowed Azamina. Hollowed Azamina, they just don't do anything, and the only way they can add it is if they play cards like Talents to Take, and I highly doubt anyone's playing Forbidden Chalice, because you can't Forbidden Droplet under Retaliating Sea.
No, you cannot. No, you cannot. We'll go into the next slide here. We'll talk about the different strategies that were in the top decks, or top tables. Snake Eye being the main one, and the one that we're going to talk about first. Let's talk about the Azamina package. So the Azamina package added some much needed consistency, but it also added an out to Nibiru. Actually, no, not even. It's just an Omni Negate. It's absolutely insane. Again, I don't know why they printed this shit. They hit the consistency of Snake Eyes just so that we can have another way to get into Engine that also doubles as an Omni Negate. Again, I don't know, but we have it here. So Snake Eye was definitely the best deck in the room. Fire King also benefited from the addition of Volcanics. And now they have a couple different lines where they can go into OG Grunics and Sacred Grunics for cards such as Zombie Vampire if they want to hit their engine and go gambling. If they want to also have... What else is Zombie Vampire used for? It's just to get into engine, right?
Mostly to get into engine. You can also try and see where your opponent is on at the worst case, and then you can play around your strategy in that regard.
Imagine Zombie Vampire into a tier play.
We don't talk about that.
That's...
So I know in the OCG, the main thing that people were playing was the number 90 Photon Lord as an Omni Negate, but considering our formats are completely different, I think the Zombie Vampire isn't the worst thing, especially as a consistency piece, just to get into your engine, whether it be the Snake Eye engine or your Fire King engine.
Just to correct you, Photon Lord is not an Omni Negate. It's a
Monster Negate, yes, that is right.
But it also went into Grunic's Eternity, Hyang, which is a board wipe. And now you can actually use your Fire King Sanctuaries effect the secondary effect that everyone seems to forget about, to go into that card. It's also really good because once it gets popped, it also summons back the two materials.
You get the bodies for Fire King monsters.
Which are insane by itself. So you trigger Sacred Fire King Garunic, you trigger all of them really.
They all trigger in some way or form when they're getting popped.
Shape or form. I think the Fire King variant was probably the more explosive variant and the variant that also played better into Fuolos, which is probably why it ended up winning the whole event. Who was it? Landon Oliver.
I believe it's Landon Oliver, yeah.
He ended up winning the event with the deck. And a great player, but the deck was insane.
Definitely is insane. And it actually has some good ways to play into Tempai shiftering you, or just playing into Tempai with Okonex being able to search upon X, become level 1, and then just make a Fuko. It's just so silly. Like,
that's insane.
It definitely is a lot easier to make that than in just Snake Eye.
Fuko was the star again in that matchup. And again, so the two other variants of Snake Eye that we saw were Rescue Ace, which is not really a Snake Eye deck, but Sinful Spoils into Rescue Ace Hydrant. Again, a great deck. I've actually went up against it recently on this channel without the Azamina cards, but that deck is kind of insane. If you play against someone who knows what they're doing, and also it plays around Fuolos pretty well. It doesn't play around Shifter very well, but it can. And then the other variant is Cash, which it's been played for a while now as a secondary or tertiary engine. It wasn't as popular, but it still saw some play. And then of course Fiendsmith, which actually fell out of favor. A lot of decks were still playing because Caesar is an insane card. Also, you get a lot of bodies for free, essentially, right? But I think with the addition of the new cards, the Azamina cards, Fiendsmith kind of becomes not as needed. Again, the OCG does play it still because they have Beatrice, and they also don't have as many starters as we do. They have, what,
2 Bonfire, 1 Wanted.
On top of the Snake Eye Ash limit.
Another thing that we saw with the Fiendsmith engine was that people were cutting down on numbers as well, because going into a full board of either Azamina, Snake Eye, whatever have you, the cards almost start feeling like bricks. Which is funny to say because they're very strong cards, but activating Engraver, Searching Tract into a board of, let's say, Sylvia, Desiree, IP benched, Flameberg with Princess in yard, it's kind of tough. And we noticed that in a lot of the deck lists, people were either playing only 2 Engraver with the new card Lacrima, or just playing 1 Engraver itself as a brick, just to bridge into Caesar play. It's kind of crazy to think about how the Fiendsmith engine has not diminished, but has gone down.
Gotten power crept. It's been one set, it's already gotten power crept.
It's crazy what has happened to the deck, but just goes to show the power of new cards, I guess.
Thank you, Konami. Thank you. We will gladly pay hundreds of dollars for the new cards. Alright, next deck, Yubel. So Yubel, nothing changed, nothing got added, maybe some new hand traps, Fuolos in the main, but Yubel itself is the same exact deck we've been seeing. And because of that, it actually suffered because Fuolos and Dominance Impulse hurt the deck a lot.
It's very hard to play on those cards without giving them at minimum 2 draws, if that.
Best you can do is, I think, if you have the hand, you can go into a Phantom, and that's really about it. Everything else will just give them 4 draws, 5 draws.
People may argue that you want to wait to commit the Fuolos, but I think that's a card you can just shotgun. Just 100%. Shotgun and draw phase.
There's almost no harm in shotgunning it. Which is another reason why I think the card is kind of stupid. There's all these fake drawbacks that don't really exist, right? The only real drawback is that you can't activate it like Max C on your turn with cards on board. So it can only be a going second card, but what does it matter, right? It's just that good.
It's insane. And that's probably why we saw a low conversion rate to top cut for Yubel at this event.
Definitely a huge knockdown from the last event where it was the winner, and definitely a fall from grace in that sense. But nothing else too crazy to say about it. We'll go on to the next one, which is Tempai.
Oh, our favorite.
Easily the winner in Rage of the Abyss. It added 6 new hand traps into the main deck that are absolutely pivotal. However, it did not really convert into the same amount of tops, and that's mostly due to the fact that it still loses to the same shit. It still loses to Fuko, D-Barrier, Cosmic Cyclone, Threatening Roar, which was in Ryan Yu's side deck for some reason. And so, I don't think it could keep up with the same non-engine that it was losing to. And again, Tempai has always been this, you better have it, right? That's kind of the game plan for the deck. Where if you don't have the outs in your opening hand, you could scoop and go next. If you brick, you just scoop and go next, and you hope to win like, the 2 out of 3 in terms of hand comparison. Which is also why I freaking hate the deck and I think it should die.
Well, it was favored for this event. It definitely had a presence in Swiss, but Tempai will just knock out other Tempai decks if it's that prevalent. We saw in Top Cut, what was it, 5 in top 32?
Yes.
A very low conversion rate.
And then 1 after top 32 in top 16.
Yeah.
So 4 out of 5 Tempai lists. And this is kind of actually a recurring theme with Tempai where a lot of them will, or a good number of them will make it to top 32 or top 64 and then immediately all get knocked out for the most part. Maybe 1 or 2 will last up until top 16 and above that. And so I think Tempai is still a great regional deck. It's still a great locals deck. If you don't mind being hated by all your community. For full transparency, our teammate Farouk did make day 2 with this deck. He's been playing it since Nats, or before Nats. He top 64 Nats with the deck. And he was one of those guys at Nats that got knocked out in top 64. Again, because it's hand comparison. Not to knock on Farouk because he's a great player. But the deck is limiting. It limits your skill ceiling. But we did see some newer techs being played. One big one was Grand Tusk Dragon, which pops 2 on summon, so it's a seals target. This was just another added layer of disruption. If they don't want to go into simple stuff like Kwakimeru in the matchups that it's not very good against.
It's also a good card to side into if you think your opponent's going to make you go first, so you set up seals and then go off from there on their turn. It was played very minimally in the beginning of Tempai's life, but now we're starting to see it come back.
2 other techs that were being played, not just in Tempai, but in some other decks as well. Typhoon and Final Bringer of End Times. So Final Bringer of End Times is a card that came out in Rage of the Abyss. It reads, target 1 monster on your field and 1 card on your opponent's field, destroy them both. It's kind of like Fire King Skyburn, right? But more generic.
Just a tad.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. I think it's a good alternative for decks that have no outs to floodgates and such, but it remains to be seen if this card is actually going to be a good card or if it's just a cute little pick right now. But I will say, we said the same thing about Metaltronus, right?
Yes, that we did.
I thought Metaltronus was insane. From the start, I will say, I thought Metaltronus was absolutely insane. People didn't believe me, but here we are, right?
Yeah.
You know what it is. I also believe in Final Bringer. I think it's a good card. I just think it needs to see the right format.
Definitely a good card, and it's a card that definitely I can see in side decks of specific decks, especially like cards like Yubel. They love destruction. Probably another good deck is Memento, because they love seeing their own destruction. You could say there is an argument that you could play it in Fire King, but probably
Fire King has an archetype one that can be searched, right? Although they still only play it at 1, so if you want to supplement the engine, but at that point you could just play 3 Skyburn.
Yeah.
Skyburn also has the additional effect Engrave where you can protect your Fire Kings from being destroyed.
Yeah. It should be noted though, with this card, the way that it's worded, it does not need to have both targets on the field to resolve. So Farouk, one of his go-to plays would be Genroku. Summon Genroku, go ahead and activate the Final Bringer, target Chain Genroku, special summon, and still pop the opponent's card. So that's one of the things that makes the card really good.
It's worded similarly to Princess, where it says destroy them.
Very good.
So it's good. If you can find a use for it, by all means, give it a try. But in regards to Tempai, the deck still does the same thing. It's just a little bit better now, but not too different. Now, we'll talk about the Sky Striker list that made waves all over the internet.
Yeah.
And this is a deck I'm actually super excited about, because I played Sky Strikers for a while when it died, and I love the deck. It's a very niche playstyle, right? And Ryan Yu has historically done very well with the deck. But my question is, how did this happen? Who let this man get all the way to the finals with Sky Strikers? Because regardless of how good he is with the deck, clearly he proved us wrong, right? But it should not have made it.
So, funny thing here. So, after my great performance in the main event, I decided to enter the Giant Card event. I win the first 2 rounds against, funny enough, Centurion Bestial. And in the 3rd round, I played this bloke from Ireland. He just decided to show up. And he was playing Sky Striker. Now, we end up going into a game 3. And this man, in time, goes and activates Spell Shattering Arrow in the battle phase, destroying my 3 face-up spells and inflicting 1500 damage to me. I have Flameberg up, go ahead and swing into him. Widow anchors it. So that was the end of my run. It was a 6-round event, and I died in the middle of it. I ended up meeting back up with him towards the end of day 1, and he told me he actually lost in the finals. So he made it up to round 6 of that Giant Card event, just falling short of the Giant Card. So it goes to show that with the correct pilot, you can play this deck. He was playing a go second strategy, just like Ryan Yu's list, although probably a couple different techs here and there.
Spell Shattering Arrow definitely wasn't in Ryan's list. But again, we'll talk about Sky Striker a little bit in the sense where it's a good deck and historically one of the best decks, I think. However, right now in the format, it's just too slow, right? And it used to be a going first deck, and then I think maybe around 2020 it changed to a going second strategy with the addition of a bunch of powerful board breaker spells that were added to the game, such as Lightning Storm, such as Triple Tactics Talent, Triple Tactics Thrust. All cards that work very well in tandem with the Sky Striker engine. With that being said, it's a going second strategy that doesn't play Shifter or the Charmies, which immediately makes it a lot worse than any other going second strategy in the game. I think the reason why Ryan was able to do so well is 1, he's one of the best pilots of the deck, probably in the world. And 2, the same board breakers that make Tempai insanely good are the same board breakers that he would play in his deck. He played Raigeki, he played Lightning Storm, he played Feather Duster, he played, what else did he play?
Raigeki, Feather Duster, Lightning Storm, Thrust, Talents.
And what the strategy, from what I saw in the written feature matches, no video because it's Canada. What the strategy he went was to break boards, going second, draw a lot, and then cripple the follow-up. And so cards like Shark Cannon and Widow Anchor are very, very good at breaking, not just breaking boards, but also crippling your opponent's follow-up, right? If you're able to break their boards with cards like Lightning Storm and Raigeki, and then after, in your main phase 2, set up your Shark Cannons and your Widow Anchors and your other generic spells. He also played Droplets. Desires as well.
Draw engine.
If you're able to do that, it's Sky Striker wins a battle of attrition in a very simplified game, right?
100%.
And then to close games out, he would just Shark Cannon, Widow Anchor, go into Access Code and attack for game. And cards like that are really good. And so while it shouldn't have happened, and I'm not saying this because I don't like Ryan or I don't think he's good. The deck is just not that good, right? It shouldn't have happened. It did because he just found the right circumstance. I'm going to be trying this list. You'll see it definitely in a video coming up. I don't know when, but I'm definitely going to try this list. But going next, we had Pax Bestial Centurion deck. This deck was actually talked about a little bit in the inner circles going into the event, where, well, people thought this deck was good for the same reasons that Pac thought it was good. It's good into Fuelos, it's good into Shifter, it's good into Perulia. It sets up double Blazar Dragon, which is insane. It draws 2, you play hand traps, you play Bestials. However, it does still lose to the same stuff that it's always lost to, which is hand traps. Ghost Ogre, Imperm, Veiler, Ash Blossom, Dominus Impulse kills this deck. Cosmic Cyclone kills this deck. So for that reason, I think Pac was able to make it to top cut because he's very good and he's a great pilot of the deck. I think the reason why we saw so many of this list fall out of favor and die up until in Swiss was because hand traps kill the deck. A nice interesting tech that Pac was using as well as other people was the Bestial Lubellion, Branded Regained, and the Bestials to draw more. and to set up more level 8s to bridge into their level 12 synchros. The new synchros also made it very resilient, and the new tuner from Info also made it pretty resilient as well. But again, it still loses to the same shit, right?
One thing I've noticed too from the deck is that if you don't draw enough engine, it kind of folds in on itself. The Bestial package, great as it is, it doesn't do enough on its own. I faced a couple of them in the Giant Card event, and when they didn't have enough engine, it just folds into even a minimal Snake Eye board from what I was playing. I know James Guerrero, teammate of ours, was also playing the Centurion deck for the main event. He day 2'd as well, but unfortunately got knocked out as well. But it just goes to show that the deck is good. It is viable. And obviously, any deck is viable with the correct pilot, but this deck definitely is one to watch out for.
Yep, I think moving forward, we'll see a lot more of this list being played, especially because Pac, a popular YouTuber, played it. I don't think it'll get too much better than it is right now. Especially with the loss of Red Archfiend or Hot Red Dragon Calamity. That was a turn skip, right? And we don't have the turn skip anymore, so now a lot of these Centurion players who played a turn skip that deck are now forced to interact with their opponents. Moral of the story, just get better at the game, right? Going next, we have the Overhyped and Underdelivered decks, the losers of this event. Mermail was number 1 on the list.
So hyped.
So excited. Everyone was so excited for this deck.
Shout out to James Guerrero, who flipped decks the day before the event.
Shout out to Kareem, who didn't even make it to the main event.
Now, we will say, though, Mermail is a very strong deck if it goes uninterrupted. Now, you could say that about any deck.
No,
but a hand-rip deck.
Hand-rip 2, hand-rip 3 on your turn. They summon the Ice Barrier monster that
summon Saiho,
and then
Floodgate monster. It's insane. No, it's...
and Double Toad.
Although from what I've seen though, they've been playing the new Stream Virtue Dragon. I believe that's what it's called. The Virtue Dragon, which sets up the rank 3, which searches you for their in-arch type Sword Soul Blackout, essentially.
Yep.
So more on top of more interruption. It's just a crazy deck, but unfortunately, it fell short for the event. Now, there was a day 2 list that did make it, but only one, at least from what we've heard.
Now, what kills Mermails? Perulia is a very big one. Even Fuelos, to some extent, it doesn't hurt as much, but Perulia definitely kills it. Dominus Impulse definitely kills it.
And the biggest one,
Droll and Lockbird.
Oh, I was thinking Dimensional Shifter, but
yeah, those two, Droll and Shifter, which are both being made. It's a good deck, but again, overhyped. I think it's going to continue to underdeliver until even with the right pilot, it's like a high roll deck, right? You can't really win going second either. So.
I could see it probably doing well at locals and regionals, but for these tier 3 events, it'll struggle. But it's doable. But you just need the right RNG.
Now we also have 6 Sam, which got new support in Rhoda. I always thought it was fake. It's never going to be good again. Guys, put it down. Let Shen rest for good. The deck's never going to be good again.
There was even a murmur of the deck for this event, to be honest. It wasn't a thing.
The next 2 decks we'll actually talk about in tandem with each other because they both suffer from the same thing, Memento and Chimera. Now both of these decks are super high ceiling, explosive combo decks that again lose to what? Shifter, Fuelos, Perulia. Not so much Perulia for Chimera and Memento, but Fuelos for sure. And again, we saw so much of this in Swiss, right? I think the Tempai players are just taking out all of these decks.
No, definitely the combination of Fuelos, Shifter, it makes it hard for these decks. Now, I will say Chimera can probably play under Fuelos a bit better because of Chimera Fusion being a quick play.
Yeah. So you could just set it up so that you set it and then wait till your opponent's turn and then summon a Guardian Chimera from there. You just don't get the hand rip, right? However, Memento Fusion is also a quick play, right?
It is.
But you can't really set up your board without doing your full combo turn 1. And both of these decks traditionally struggle very hard going second as well. And so, with that being said, I think we're going to continue to see these decks not be too great in the upcoming format. Again, what we said was that our reckless combo decks are not going to make it anymore, guys. You gotta have a plan B and a strong one at that, because Tempai is going to be running rampant.
The thing too is these decks, well, they're great going first, and they may play cards like Cross-Eyed Designator to mitigate the impact of these new cards. Crossout Designated just doesn't play well going into a board. So it's almost a moot point to play it going into a board because you're afraid of these cards. It just makes it rough. Like we said, Foolish definitely has made a shift in the meta, and there are winners and there are losers to this card coming out.
Yup. And unfortunately, all 6 of these decks that we're listing have lost to it. White Forest and Runic Stun kind of also suffer from Dominus Impulse being in the format. Both of them, if you Dominus Impulse the woes, God, that's over, dude. It's over. They don't have a single play after that. What do they set up? Because White Forest, what does it do? It just sets up, it draws a lot, it goes into your Runic engine, and then sets up woes so that you can book their field on their turn. And that's about all that it does. Yeah. It's like supposed to be a control deck that does the same thing every turn, and I understand, but Bestials kill the deck. Impulse kills the deck, and then, of course, Fuelos also kills the deck. So, White Forest, clear loser in Rhoda.
Actually, what's funny, Fuelos is actually kind of a decent draw into that deck because they will synchro summon on your turn several times.
And of course, Runic Stun, I think it's almost time for that deck to go. It's still good, but with Shifter and Fuelos going around the format, you're only summoning one time, right? But the one time you do, if you're giving your opponent a draw, not great. And of course, Dominus Impulse on the one summon that they try to do, not great. We also have new side cards that are hurting, such as Typhoon or text being played, Final Bringer. Those are all cards that are being played on top of Cosmic Cyclone to get rid of floodgates and such. So I think Runic Stun is finally going to start seeing a decline in popularity. Sorry Stun players, get good, play a different deck. Yep, and this goes into the points that we all talked about. So we'll go into our final thoughts here. As we said, decks that can play minimally into Fuelos and Perulia will now be the new best decks. As we saw, Fire Kings, to an extent Yubel, not too much, but a little bit. As well as decks Rescue Ace, Snake Eye Azamina, and what else? That's about it, right?
Until December comes around and we get crossover breakers and we get the introduction of 2 new decks that, funny enough, it's funny because those decks, Ryziel and Malice, they kind of slow down the meta.
Yes.
But it's weird. It slows it down, but they're so strong.
I think Ryziel in particular is going to be the best deck. We see that in the OCG. But if you take one look at that deck and see what it does, it's a clear reason why that deck's the best deck over there, and I think it'll continue to be the same over here. But until December, this is going to be representative of, I think, the rest of the format. I think for the month of October and November, all the way up until YCS Anaheim, we'll see the same decks being good. Snake Eye Azamina, Tempai Dragons, and Yubel. I think those are the big 3, with Snake Eye Azamina saying fuck the big 3, it's just big me. But yeah, that does it for this video. Leave a like, comment, give us your thoughts if we missed something. If you have a deck profile you want us to shout out, if you made day 2 or something, please feel free to reach out into the comments below. We're still running the giveaway for an SP Little Knight. We'll put that video in the description box below. Go like, comment, and subscribe on that video as well. And thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you in the next one. Until next time, peace out.
Left on red said none of this shit would get easier. Best friend flirting with death. Collect winnings from the last check. On to the next. Rinse and repeat up to the last step. Then we get hit.